Hello, I am Xarkun and this is World of Warships Legends. Today, we're taking another look at the Arena mode, and while the weekend is over and the first season of Legendary Tier Arena has concluded, I believe more seasons of the Legendary Tier Arena are on the horizon for the duration of this holiday/early January 2022 update. So I think all of this should still be relevant in a couple of weeks' time. As you can see, we are in the legendary tier German battleship, the Grosse Kurfürst, and we find ourselves in a match with all battleships, which is the ideal matchmaking in the arena mode for the Grosse Kurfürst. And I'm here to tell you that this ship shines in this mode, especially with this kind of matchmaking. I wish the GK were this good in standard battles, but it's just not. And we're going to talk about a few reasons why, and also some things that you may wish to try to incorporate into any battles you play in the GK in standard battles. At least I'm going to try to incorporate some of what I do in this game when I take the GK out into standard, because the GK has some problems. Let's face it, I've talked about it before. Out of the 4 legendary tier battleships, the Yamato, the Conqueror, the GK, and now the Montana, I really don't think there's any question that the Grosse Kurfürst is the weakest of the 4. And you can disagree with me in the comments on that if you want to. Let me know what you think. You can tell me why you think one of the other 3 ships might be less strong than this. But here are the things that are a problem with the GK. First, it's abysmal concealment. It's spotted from the moon, which means it's always going to be a target no matter what, and it's going to be a target very early on in the game. That, coupled with the fact that it is a gigantic behemoth, makes it quite easy to hit. And the superstructure of the ship is probably about the size of some cruisers or destroyers, so it's a very squishy, very juicy target up there. And when you play the GK, you'll probably find that most of the damage you are taking comes through your superstructure, because the rest of the armor scheme along the hull is actually quite solid, and there is the turtleback armor as well, protecting the citadel from close-range battleship AP shots. So there's that. It's a heavily armored ship, but it's a gigantic target, and most of the time it just tends to function like a damaged piñata. Also, it is not maneuverable in any way. It takes forever to start and stop, and it takes forever to turn. Despite the fact that it has hydroacoustic search, the duration of that consumable is a mere 60 seconds. Which is not a lot of time for it to be running in order for you to, try to get advanced warning of torpedoes. And even if you do get advanced warning of torpedoes thanks to the hydroacoustic search, most of the time what I find happens is I see the torpedoes coming earlier than I otherwise would have thanks to the sonar, but I still can't dodge them because this ship can't turn. So, in short, the GK is a bit of a tough ship to play, and I did enjoy it quite a bit when it first debuted in the game, but I've since soured on it a little bit because I just don't think it's super effective in the meta, and honestly I find it difficult to play. There are a lot of apologists for the Grosse Kurfürst, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, of course, but there are a lot of fans of the GK who I know watch the channel and will have some things to say about my thoughts here in the comments section, so feel free. But I want you to take note of what I am doing here. I've been advocating for weeks now, every time I play a battleship, that bow tanking or pushing nose in is often not a good idea because it doesn't leave you a good way to disengage. But with the Grosse Kurfürst here, you can see that I am reversing toward this enemy GK, and actually I think they're both enemy GKs, and as I'm reversing, I'm getting into secondary range, using the secondary enhancement consumable, dealing some damage to these ships here as I reverse ever closer toward them. Now, if things get too hot, and I feel like I'm being focused too much and taking too much damage, well then I can simply move forward and get further away from the threat. But I think, actually, this might be the most ideal way to push in, or to play the GK, rather. If you're going to play the GK and you're going to go bow in toward a lot of ships, you're really going to have to wait until a lot of the enemy herd has been thinned out. You simply cannot be focused by multiple enemies in this ship or in any ship. And in order to push effectively in this ship, you really have to make sure you are limiting the amount of people that are shooting you. And probably the best and most consistent way to do that is to sort of bide your time and carefully synchronize or time your pushes for when the enemy herd has been thinned out and when you pushing in could actually make a decisive impact on a game. And I am, of course, talking about standard battles right now rather than arena. But it seems to me, after playing this game in the GK, which we're going to finish this game with more damage done than I've ever even come close to dealing in this ship, and of course part of that is the fact that I'm shooting only at battleships in the context of an arena mode game, and all of them have these power-ups that regenerate their health very, very slowly, so there are more hit points to be taken and therefore more damage to be done in this game mode than there are in standard. So of course you shouldn't expect results like this in the standard game mode. But even so, my reversing in there, note that both of the enemy GKs found it immensely difficult to continue pushing in toward me and my last remaining teammate. And I think that might actually be the key to making this ship as effective as possible. Another problem with the GK that I neglected to mention in my laundry list of complaints about the ships earlier on in this video is that the firing angles on the guns are, in a word, abysmal. But here's the key. They're really only abysmal if you are pushing forward with the GK, if you're firing toward the front of the ship. Then you have to give an outrageous amount of broadside to get all 4 of your turrets on target. But if you are reversing, I think the firing angles are marginally better when the guns are facing away from the ship, and in fact you can see the turret icons there to the left of the reticule. You can see that I really would not have to turn much and give much of an angle to get all 4 of my turrets on target on that enemy GK. The bottom line is the firing angles from the rear on the GK are better. And because this ship is, in fact, so heavily armored and so difficult to damage, if you're angled away from the enemy and you're pointing your stern at them, you can get all of your guns on target and they are going to struggle to do any kind of meaningful damage to you in that situation. The only exception is the Yamato. One of the GK's supposed main strengths is its bow armor. It does have 50mm plating along both sides of the bow, although the very center of the bow is only 32mm of armor. Nevertheless, this plating means realistically that the Yamato, which can overmatch 32mm of armor with its 18-inch guns, is going to struggle to overmatch the GK through the bow, offering the GK more protection than really any other battleship in the game has against the Yamato's unique ability to go right through the standard 32mm bow plating that is present on most of the high-tier battleships in this game. On the stern of the ship, it's a different story. The stern, on the part where if you're looking at the stern of the ship right now, you can see the gray portion of the camo scheme, I suppose, and you can see how as it goes along the side of the ship, it turns darker. Well, that little gray triangle section of the bow, I think that's about perfectly representative of where the 32 millimeter armor section is. In other words, the entire stern of this ship is only coated in 32 millimeters of armor. I think I just said bow, and I'm stumbling all over my words here, so I apologize for the rambling quality of this commentary, but the stern of this ship, only 32 millimeters of armor, no 50 millimeter armor plating to throw off any Yamato shells that are going to overmatch you. So if you're pointing your stern at a Yamato, good chance that the Yamato is going to be able to pen right through it as if it doesn't exist. But then, of course, that is where angling comes in and making sure you're presenting enough of your side that the Yamato wants to shoot at your side and then hopefully bounce his shells off your incredibly thick side armor and deck armor. Of course, the deck armor is only thick amidships near the superstructure. In any case, if you are facing stern in toward an enemy, you can get all of your turrets on target and present a more favorable defensive angle for yourself. And because of the tankiness of these ships, any ship that is trying to push into you while you're stern in is going to struggle to do so, and they're going to have to contend with your secondaries and all that stuff if they get closer. So, after playing this game, I have decided that next time I take the GK out into a standard battle, I'm going to try to see if I can find a position on the map where the enemy team has to push into my ship in order to achieve some kind of objective, and then I'm going to see whether I think the GK is more effective in scenarios like that. I have a feeling it will be. And you can see, I mean, we've taken a lot of damage from the enemies in this game, but we're in no danger of dying. Part of that certainly has to do with the fact that we've got that repair buff going that acts as a sort of free will to rebuild on a permanent basis, and thus we're gaining hit points every second. But even so, I think the tankiness of this ship is much more evident in positions like the one I showed you earlier on in this game. And you'll note that the herd of enemy ships has thinned out quite significantly, and only when this occurred did we decide to actually push in and try to brawl with that enemy Yamato. Of course, we utterly failed in our drive-by attempt to nuke his citadel, but even so, I think it was a good move, and it was good to wait until the enemy herd had been thinned out a little bit. I think when you look at the battle results of this game, you will find a GK on my team who sits in last place, along with everybody else, and who pushed in immediately at the start of the battle, got instantly demolished, and received no XP, really, for any of his troubles. Although that might have not have been my deceased teammate. That might have been somebody on one of these other teams. I don't know. In any case, it's just me and my teammate GK versus this Yamato, and I think a GK out there who is on basically full health. And here I am going bow in toward this Yamato, trying to get all of my turrets on target, opening up the GK's broadside in order to get all my firepower on there, and as you can see, I am punished for doing it. I am using the high explosive, though, against this Yamato. The goal here is, of course, to start fires, especially since I'm in secondary range. It looks like the Yamato has damage conned the fire that I started with my main guns, so any fires lit by my secondaries in this engagement should be permanent. Meanwhile, the Yamato has dropped his focus on me. He's shooting at my teammate now, and I am shooting at this enemy GK who is broadside in front of me. We hit him very hard there for about 25,000 damage-ish, 24,000, and we go over the 300,000 damage done mark, which, again, this is the arena mode. It sort of lends itself to ridiculously high damage games like this, but come on. If you play this ship or any ship in Arena and you do outrageous amounts of damage like this, I mean, it's entertaining. It's certainly fun. I really did enjoy playing this game, and I was shocked, honestly, that I was able to get this kind of performance out of this ship. I didn't think I'd be doing nearly 350,000 damage, or rather 340,000 damage, but there it is. Apparently my teammate did even better than I did, so good for him. Anyway, let me know what you think of my thoughts on the GK in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. We're approaching 5,000 subscribers, so if you are not subscribed, please consider doing so. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.